All right, thanks for tuning back into another episode of the Research Review here on baseball. Late February, 2 new articles published. The first one I want to go over looks at Tommy John and the return to play both at the sport and also playing the sport at the same level. So all the time we hear people talking about, I had Tommy John, I threw harder, and it was almost seen as not a bad thing to have major reconstructive surgery, especially at a relatively young age. Now we understand that's probably not the case for a variety of reasons. This study actually looked at some data on do you go back to the sport and then can you go back to play at that same level. So the good news is that most players were able to return to the sport at the same level in major league, in college, and even in high school, yet it progressively gets lower over time. So professional players, very much so, and that seems to be getting better. Interestingly, minor league players, 90+% came back to play the sport again, but only about 70% or less actually came back to pitch at that same minor league level, probably for a variety of reasons, including type of contracts, sheer amount of people available at that level, nutrition, training programs, a lot of things. And then as we went down through the college ranks and then down into high school, still in the 80 percentile, mid 80s in terms of both coming back to play baseball again and also to play baseball at the same level. So some encouraging data there, but at the end of all of that, we also see that most of these players were not able to throw at the same velocity or quite the same, were pitching less innings, giving up more walks and throwing less strikes. So some data that definitely suggests that performance is definitely different after having Tommy John. So maybe we should continue to explore why these things happen, how we can at least reduce some of these injuries and take a smarter approach to both training and managing volume as it relates to all pitching at all levels. And interestingly, another study that kind of branches off of that is how do we properly return to a throwing program? I get this question all the time. What should I do? How much should I throw? When should I throw? This study looked at creating some criteria that allow us to move through the actual process of rehab back into throwing at that same level like that previous study just talked about. So we know baseball players have really weird kind of mechanics as it relates to shoulder range of motion and how that changes. Motion of the actual shoulder blade itself. Even the hips and the core, we all now understand, are very important. So finding someone that can not only accurately assess this, but then tell you what you need to do to make some changes there is really, really important. After we get range of motion and mobility of the shoulder blades and the legs strong again, we need to add some plyometrics with jumping and medicine ball throwing and all those things. And then last, we can get into a more formalized throwing program, right? Where we want to look at the volume of throwing from flat ground, throwing off of the mound, long toss for recovery, and how these progressively increase to really give yourself a workload score, which is typically like how often or the volume of what you do from a throwing perspective, multiply that by how intensely you do it. So that gives us a workload score, which we can then manage as you get back to pitching at a high level. So the bottom line is that we know that Tommy John is probably going to slow players down and give them less chance to play at the exact same level in the future. We're getting better at returning players from the surgery, and we're now starting to understand how we scientifically go about taking players from injury state all the way through a strength and conditioning program and a return to throw. So if you're, a player, a parent, please find some good information. You know where to find me. If anyone in the Richmond area needs help with getting back from an arm injury and certainly progressing that with all of these variables in mind, come get assessed. Let's get after it and make some progress. Thanks.